Hi students, we're going to talk about how to quote sources for your essays. So some theorists came up with this term quote sandwich. I did not come up with this, but that's what it's called. And the reason that it's called a quote sandwich is because there's a 3-step process involved in quoting sources. So first you're going to introduce the source quote. So there's a statement that introduces the source quote. And after that statement, you're going to put in the author's full name. Then you're going to insert the source quote, and then you want to explain the source quote coming out of it, how it pertains to your argument. So essentially, my way of showing it is the 3-step process is introduce, insert, and summarize. And notice how I say insert a meaningful quote. So you don't want to put something that states the obvious or something that's repeating something that you said or a little snippet of information, because then you're really not using the quoted material properly, or just taking a shortcut and not using it to your advantage. All right, so let's look at these 3 steps separately, and then I'm going to do them all together so you could see what a complete quote looks like in in-text citation in MLA format. So step 1, you're introducing the source quote by including a sentence that leads into the quote, and then you're going to use what's called a signal phrase with the author's name. So here's what happens. So first you have the introduction sentence. This tells your reader why the information is there, because if you don't explain why the information is there, then the audience is really puzzled and trying to figure out what's going on in your essay. And then after that question is answered of why is this information here, then your audience is looking to find out where does this information come from. And that's what the introduce part does. So here's an example. The winter of 2014 was the worst winter I can ever remember in my entire lifetime. According to Chicago weather expert Tom Skilling, now I'm ready to insert the source quote. So I'm inserting the source quote in MLA format. So I'm making sure that I'm including the author's last name coming out of the quote. In this particular quote, this comes from Chicago weather expert Tom Skilling's blog. And on his blog, he had 4 paragraphs. So I put the paragraph number, PARA1. You would not typically do this. In a print source, you're going to put the page number. If it's not a print source, and say that you got the information from a video, it's not going to have a page number. Or if you have something from a website, it's not going to have a page number. It's just going to be the person's information in parentheses. And I'll show you exactly how to do that after I talk about this particular source quote. So after I do that, I'm going to have, in this case, the paragraph number. Say that there's like 30 paragraphs. So I'm not going to count, okay, paragraph 1, paragraph 17, right? I'm not going to do that. So it's just 4 paragraphs. So that's why I put paragraph 1, PARA for paragraph. So the direct source quote is, Chicago is in the midst of its 10th coldest winter on record, and blah, 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 right? So coming out of the quote, I'm going to enclose the quoted material. There's no period here because the period goes after the information in parentheses. So say that I got it from Tom Skilling's blog, and it wasn't a paragraph number or whatever. It was just like one big cluster of information. It's going to have Skilling, parenthesis, period. Same thing if it came from something that was on a video, it's going to be Skilling, parentheses, period. If it's a page number, it's not going to be PG, and it's not going to be, page, it's not going to be Skilling, comma. It's going to be Skilling, say it's page number 89. So it'd be Skilling 89, parentheses, period. I would never put Skilling 2014. And the reason that I don't put the year in there is because that's what you would do for APA format. But in English classes, we're using MLA format. So we never put the year in the parentheses at the end of the source quotes. All right, let's look at how we summarize the source quote. So I've inserted the source quote. Now I have to wrap up this conversation of the quote before I move to the next part of the conversation. And keep in mind that I don't want to end a paragraph with a source quote, because then I'm not summarizing that source quote. I also can't start a paragraph with a source quote, otherwise I'm not introducing the source quote. So after I insert the source quote, I'm going to summarize how the quote pertains to my own argument. So I wrote, the temperatures were so low at one point that winter that COD had to cancel classes 2 days in a row because there was a freeze advisory in effect. All right, now I'm summarized the source. Now I'm ready to go to the next part of the conversation in my essay. Well, let's see what these 3 steps look like all together. So notice how in the red I have the introduce. In the dark blue I have the insert part, and in the light blue I have the summarize part. The winter of 2014 was the worst winter I can ever remember in my entire lifetime. According to Chicago weather expert Tom Skilling, Chicago is in the midst of its 10th coldest winter, right? Then I come out of the source quote, Skilling, right? And now I'm going to wrap up the source quote. The temperatures were so low at one point that winter that COD had to cancel classes 2 days in a row because there was a freeze advisory in effect. Now I've introduced, inserted, and summarized the quote, and that's perfect citation in MLA format.